Hello friends, welcome back to my channel, and today we are back with another exciting video. So in this video we are going to talk about Jenkins, and this will be a complete or full course for Jenkins. So this is going to take quite long time, so don't worry, if you don't have enough time to see the whole tutorial, you start the tutorial and you can pause it, you can save the tutorial and then you can watch it later whenever you have time. But this will be a very useful tutorial who want to learn about Jenkins, and this will be the complete tutorial for beginners. So if you are a new person to Jenkins, or even if you are a experienced person, I'm sure you will have a lot of information in this tutorial which will be useful for you. So before getting started, let me talk about what we will cover as part of our complete Jenkins tutorial. So we'll be, as I said, this will be a end-to-end tutorial starting from basics on some theoretical concept, and also we will talk about the process, and we will see the hands-on on setting up a lot of projects, and we'll also talk about a lot of benefits, how to do things, a lot of discussion. We will have this in this tutorial. So as I said, this will be a long tutorial, and we will also share some of the tutorial links, resources which you can make use of it if some of the details we are not covering it here. So but I'll be showing this can be accessed from this video, and all those information will be shared so that you'll have a complete information and you should be good to go to start working on Jenkins. So let's go through the contents. What we will do as part of this video is, like, we will talk about what is Jenkins. We'll also talk about basics on what is DevOps and what is continuous integration and what is the DevOps lifecycle. So that is the basics which you should know, like why we are using Jenkins and what is the importance of Jenkins in a software development process. Then we will get into the hands-on process on how to set up Jenkins. So we'll set up Jenkins on Windows as well as Linux. We'll also talk about how you can do that on Mac. In later section, we are also going to talk about how to set up Jenkins on Docker as well. So also then once we also cover some of the basic architecture like Jenkins centralized architecture, and also distributed architecture like master slave, how to set up master slave architecture. And then we will start with our first job of freestyle job. Then once the job we talk about how to create jobs and all those things, we will also talk see the hands-on how to schedule the jobs using crons, how to create build triggers to start these jobs remotely. And we will also talk about parameterized jobs, webhooks, Poll SCM. So we'll have a integration with Git where we can do the webhook and integration from Git. So whenever there is a commit, or the jobs will be automatically triggered. And we'll also talk about, we'll see how Maven can be integrated with Jenkins. So we will see the complete process on setting up Maven on installation, Maven installation on Linux. We'll set up Maven, the requirement, the pre-request, how to configure the Maven. Then we will do the running jobs on Jenkins. So we'll have the Maven build for Java project. Then we'll also talk about user management in Jenkins, like how you can create users, how to control the access for user using role-based access management. And we'll see the complete configuration system in Jenkins. Like, there are a lot of options which will be very useful, so we will go through that. And then we'll also talk about how we can configure email notifications, like whenever there is a job is failed, how we can trigger an email notification, so how to configure that. And then we will talk about the Jenkins Pipeline. So we'll talk about the introduction of Jenkins Pipeline, what is the importance, what is the structure of a pipeline. Then we will also see like how we can make use of a Maven Java project to write our Jenkins Pipeline to build this Maven project. As I said, we already seen how to set up Jenkins on Linux or Windows. Then we'll also see like how we can set up Jenkins on Docker as a container, and we'll also see like how to set up Jenkins container with per system volume. So we'll have the data which will be stored. Then we'll also talk about Jenkinsfile, and how the Jenkins file is used to build a Docker image using Docker file, which is having Docker file. So we'll be using the Jenkins file, and we'll also talk about the Jenkins multi-branch pipeline. And I will also in between I'll be also showing a lot of reference links, tutorials which you can make use of it, and I will also show other links where we can make use of Jenkins projects, so which will be very useful for you in this complete course. Okay, so I'm sure this will be a great course for you, and it's a long course. As I said, take your own time, go through it multiple time. If you have a queries, if you have anything want to be clarified, just send me a message in the comment section, or something is missed, if you want to see more, you just put it in the comment section. I'll be taking care of in the future videos. So before rather than spending much time on discussing on the agenda, without further ado, let's get started. So if you are new to my channel, or if you have not subscribed to my channel, I would request you to click on the subscribe button. Also press on the like button, the bell icon, so that you'll be notified whenever there is a new video is submitted or put it on my YouTube from my side. So let's get started. So first of all, we will discuss about what is Jenkins. So those who are already aware of Jenkins, you can skip this section, you can go to the next section. But for those who are very new to what is Jenkins, so Jenkins is an open source automation server. So that's the definition of Jenkins, that because Jenkins acts as an automation server, and it helps us to automate the software development activities. So when we say about software development activities, so if you're a developer or you're operational, any person, you should know like how a software development happening. Like for example, if you are going to develop an application, you'll be having a planning stage, you'll have a coding or building stage, then you'll also have a testing phase, right? And once you test it, you'll send it to the staging environment, then you will deploy it to your production. So all these stages will have a lot of process. So what Jenkins will do is it will help us to automate this whole software development activities related to whether it's building or testing or deploying, and how it does it using facilitating through this continuous integration and continuous delivery. So it will be a continuous process for building or testing or deployment, and everything will be a continuous process, and that will help for the team. It will be done using Jenkins. So Jenkins is only one of a tool. There are different other tools who does the same process, but since Jenkins is one of common tool, we are discussing Jenkins in this tutorial. If you want to see some other tools to be created for videos with the full course, just put those comments in the video section. I will take care of that for in the future videos. Okay, so the benefits with Jenkins is like with Jenkins, the organizations or the team which you are using can accelerate the software development process using this automation. So the whole process of this deployment of the tools and how the development of the tools will be accelerated when we use this continuous integration. And the Jenkins, the benefit of using Jenkins is like Jenkins provide thousands of plugins, and that helps us for a lot of integration. For example, if you want to integrate with some of our other applications like SonarQube or Artifactory or Maven, so a lot of plugins are available. So you just need to install one of those plugins which is available for Jenkins. Then we can easily integrate those stages also into the Jenkins. So that's one of the benefits, but there are other drawbacks as well because of all these plugins, and also we will talk maybe later time. So continuous integration, as I said, it's one of the most important part of DevOps, because that is the place where the whole integration happens, and Jenkins is one of the most popular tool for continuous integration. As I said, there are other tools like GitLab CI, Circle CI, TeamCDs, a lot of other tools are there. So but Jenkins is one of most popular tool which is used across a lot of industries for continuous integration. And Jenkins also have both open source and enterprise version as well. What we are most of teams will be using will be open source, but if you want the enterprise support, you'll have to go to the enterprise support. Now let's talk about what is DevOps. So I hope you already understood what is Jenkins and what is the usage of Jenkins in software development lifecycle. But you also need to understand what is DevOps, because the DevOps is the main process where we are improving the culture between the development and operational team, right? So we have a development team and we have operational team. So development team usually does the development of software, and the operation teams does the deployment of your application into the environment. So there is always a conflict and the friction between these two teams. That is where the DevOps comes in. So where it's a combination of words to mean development and operation. I would say it's more of development, testing, and operation, because there will be multiple teams. So the development consider actually all other teams which is part of those development, whether it's a testing team as well included in that. So that is why the DevOps word comes in, and the DevOps actually it's a culture. It's not tools, or it's not something you think like it's just can be used. So DevOps is a culture which promotes the collaboration between development and operational team, and why it makes this software production and deployment faster in an automated and repeated way that will improve this deployment or implementation of this software into the market very quickly. So that is the main purpose of DevOps. So as you see, it improves the time to market, and it's a improvement or collaboration between DevOps and operational team, right, using automation. That is where this Jenkins come in, because with the automation we can do all this collaboration much better. So there will be less friction, and a lot of things can be happened using this integration process. So that is why the Jenkins come very important. So as I said, Jenkins is one of major continuous integration tool. And what do you mean by continuous integration? So let's take a scenario where you are creating an application or you're developing a software. So there are different developers who are working on it. So let's consider there is a developer 1 and another developer 2 and developer 3. So each person takes some of the features and they are developing those things, right? So but does it mean like everybody will be using separate? Previously, if you see like waterfall model, maybe everybody work on something, and at the end you do the whole things. But now the agile method, there will be small features where you'll have to frequently create your own versions. So the developer 1 maybe create a version of 1, the version 2, and the version 3. Now the challenge would be like you have 3 versions, but you need to test all these 3 versions together to make sure that the application is not broken. So that is where we will have this process of this continuous integration comes. So at the place of this planning and coding, the continuous development will happen. So where the developers will be using some kind of a source control tool, like where you'll have the Git or Subversion or GitLab. In those tools, they will have this version of this application, and very frequently they will be making those changes, and they will be committing their version into the version control tool. And there will be also continuous testing of this application, which like whenever they submit a version, the different versions will be integrated and it will be tested to make sure that this application is not broken. And there will be also a release where deployment will happen into staging and the production, and that will be happening continuously. Like whenever a new version is happening, there is a deployment happening into the production. So now if you see like for example, if you are using a mobile phone or any apps, like some apps in your Android or iOS, you may see like very frequently you get update, right? Because every time they make some changes, they have enhancement, they keep sending those updates very frequent, because that's how that their continuous integration is happening. So as you see, like continuous integration is the practice of automating the integration of code changes from multiple contributors into a single software. So as I said, there are 3 developers and they have 3 different code changes, and they have different contributors now into a single software. So we are automating that process to integrating the whole code changes from a multiple contributors into a single software. That allows these developers to frequently merge these code changes into a central repository where the builds and tests can be run. So whenever they submit these code changes, there will be into the central repository, there will be a build run on those versions. They will be testing it, and once that is confirmed, it will be deployed. So that's the overall process of the continuous integration and continuous deployment. So I hope that is very clear for you, because that's the base of the Jenkins, why we are using Jenkins for most of our activities. Now let's see the DevOps lifecycle. So what we see about this plan, code, build, test, release, deploy, operate, monitor is basically the DevOps lifecycle. So this is coming like as the picture if you see on the background. So it's like a loop, or it's a continuous feedback mechanism from the development to the operational team. So every stage have a continuous feedback, and you'll have the continuous mechanism where you will be getting a good collaboration between development and operational team. So that's the DevOps lifecycle stages, which you just need to know, like planning, coding, building, testing, release, deploy, operate, and monitor. So those are the DevOps lifecycle. Now let's get started with the hands-on. We will jump into the installation, how to install Jenkins. To install Jenkins, there are different ways to do these installations, but if you need to go to this jenkins.io download, you'll be seeing different versions of Jenkins as well, like stable, long-term stable versions, or regular releases which may not be that stable. So I will go with the LTS version. And now if you see, you'll have a lot of versions as well, like generic.var, Docker, different versions of Linux like Ubuntu, CentOS, Windows, and different other versions as well. So what we have to see is, in Windows we have two ways we can do is. One is with the MSI file, it will automatically download the installation, the Windows installer. It will automatically download the Windows installer and it will ask you to install. But I prefer making use of this .war file. So you can download this war file. Once you click on the war file, it will ask you to download. So I have only downloaded the war file, jenkins.war. So for running Jenkins on Windows war file, you also need to have Java, which is a prerequisite. So you need to go to Oracle and you need to download the Java setup, and you need to install that. So since I have already installed Java, I have this war file as well. Then I can run the commands to run Jenkins. So if you go to this documentation page, I will also link all these links into the video description of these web pages, so you can just have a look there. So if you go to this installation, you have a detailed documentation also, what is the prerequisite for hardware and how you can run the Jenkins instance as well. So for using the war file, you can run it like java-jar jenkins.war. Then it will start the instance of your Jenkins. If you want to change, if you run this command, it will automatically start with the port number 8080. If you want to change the port number, you need to run this command using java-jar jenkins.war, but you need to use the argument like http port equal to a different port number. So but if you don't want to change it, that simply you need to run this command. So let's try that. So I have a command prompt opened on Windows. I need to go to the location where I have the jar file. So I have the file jenkins.war here, right? Okay, so now I have already the Java installed, so I need to run java-jar, then jenkins.war. So it should be Jenkinsfile, okay, jenkins.war. So if you run it, it will start creating the contents. Now if you see, it's creating a folder called .jenkins under a location .user.home. So this location is under my user directory. So let me go there. So if I go to my user directory, you can see it has created a folder called .jenkins, and it's trying to create the contents over here. So let's wait for this to be completed. So you can see it's still creating a few things. So once it gets created, we'll be able to access our Jenkins from our web browser. So let me wait for this to be completed. So as you can see now, this whole unzipping of our WAR file is completed, and you can see it's given a message like Jenkins is fully up and running. And if you go to your browser and you can access your Jenkins using localhost port 8080, because we have not changed the port. So once you access it, Jenkins for the first time, it will ask you to enter the administrative password, which will be available under this location, see users, your home location, and the .jenkins secrets and the initial admin password. So let's go and check it there. So if I go to .jenkins and if I go to secrets, and you should have a file called initial admin password. So this is the same one which will be also displayed over here. If you see Jenkins initial setup is required, an admin user has been created and password generated. So you can just copy it from here, or you can copy it from that file and you can paste it over here. So in case of Linux, this location will be different, so which will be under var lib, which I will show you when we set up in the Linux environment. And then it will ask you to select your plugins. So you can select the option like install suggested plugins, so it will install some of default plugins like folders, OSAP markup, timestamper, workspace cleanup, and Gradle pipeline plugin, GitHub plugin, GitHub Groovy pipeline, stage view, Git plugin, Zoro matrix authorization strategy. So some of the plugins it will automatically install it. So let's wait for this installation to be completed. So once the plugin installation is completed, it will take you to this screen where you will have to create a first admin user. So you can enter a username, password, and you can confirm the password, and you also need to give a full name and an email address. So I will give the username as admin, and I will type a password. So you can set the password as you like. So keep it a little bit strict. I'll also give the name as admin, and here I'm just giving a sample email address. So without the email address, you will not be able to proceed. You need to give a relevant email address, so that in case if some information has been sent to your emails, it has to be given correctly. So then next you can give continue, and then it will give you the Jenkins URL, which will be your localhost 8080, which we are already accessing, and you can click on save and finish. Now our Jenkins is ready, so you can just click start using Jenkins. So this is the home dashboard for Jenkins, where you will be having different options on the left side panel, like creating a new job, or the users, the history, manage Jenkins, the views, resources, the build queue. So here you'll be able to see the jobs which you are running, whether it's failed or it's successful, how many jobs has been run, and below you should be able to see the slaves connected to this Jenkins. And you can see here we have logo, the admin, which user is logged in, and here we have some notification as well. And here you'll be also getting the information on the jobs. Since we don't have any jobs, it's not showing up here. We will see how to create jobs and everything in later point. If you go to manage Jenkins, you will have a lot of options like configure system, global tool, manage plugins, managing nodes, installing as Windows service, global security, manage credentials, right? So you have a lot of options over here as well. We'll talk about some of these options which is important, like configure system, manage nodes, and everything in different other sections. So that's all for a setting up of Jenkins in a Windows instance. Now let's see how to set up it on a Linux. Now in order to set up Jenkins on a Linux, I'm using CentOS machine. So we'll see how to set up on CentOS. I will also show you how to set up on Ubuntu, Mac, the documentation for it, so you can refer those documentation as well. So if you go to the documentation for installing, you have options to install on Ubuntu or Red Hat or CentOS, and you also have options for Mac. So there are different options you can how to install it. So you just need to download the respective versions and you have to install it. So just follow these links. I will give it in the video description. Let's get started on the CentOS, how to set up in CentOS. So the details are over here as well. So let me start the installation for CentOS. So in order to install the Jenkins on Linux, you also need to make sure that your Linux system is updated to the latest. Otherwise, you may have some issues with the repositories. So let's go to the documentation. So if you go to the documentation, we just need to run those commands. So I'll just copy this and I will run this. So before that, I just need to tell one thing, like we need to install the repository. We need to install the Java. So because Java is a prerequisite for the Jenkins installation. Yep, Java is a prerequisite, but I think this command it's already having a part of here, so we can do the installation as part of this documentation itself. So you don't need to install separately. So let's copy this command. So let's run this. So okay, so first of all, the wget is not there, so you need to install wget. So wget is installed. Now let me run this command. So you can see the first command is completed. Let me import this the keys. So now we need to use the yum upgrade so that you can update the details. So let's do the yum upgrade. So there are no packages to be updated. Now we can install Java. So it's an open JDK we are installing. So let's install Java. So it's a pretty straightforward installations. All the commands are available in this documentation itself. So you don't need to worry about anything. So as I said, Java is prerequisite, but it's already part of this command itself. So let's wait for this installation completed. So the Java installation is completed. So let me clear out the screen. So let me install Jenkins now. So the Jenkins installation is also completed. So now if you see the services or the process running, so systemctl status Jenkins as a service, you can see the Jenkins is installed, but the service is not active, right? So we need to start the service. So we need to start. Now if you check the status, it should be running. Now you should be able to access Jenkins on your web browser. So in order to access the Jenkins on the web browser, you need to know the IP address of this machine and you need to use the port number 8080. So I'm just running the IP address with port 8080. Now the challenge here, it will be like this port will not be opened on the machine. So what we need to do is we need to do some more changes over here so that the port will be open in the firewall. So what you need to do is you need to run the command sudo firewall command permanent zone public and add the port 8080. So I will also give this command in the video description. And you need to reload the firewall. So once you do that, you can check, you will be able to start getting the Jenkins. Now you see like we have a Jenkins first login page where it's asking us to enter the initial admin password. So in Windows the location was different, but in Linux if you see the location is var lib Jenkins secrets. So if you go to your machine, and if you go to this location /var/lib/Jenkins and secret, you should have a file called initial admin password, which you can just read through the file and you should get a password for it. So you can just copy that password and you can paste it here and you can continue. So we are into the next stage of installing the plugin. So I will select install suggested plugin as we did in Windows, and I'll wait for this plugin installation to be completed. So we have the plugin installation completed. So as we see on the Windows machine, we are in the screen where we need to create the first admin account. So here also I given the username as admin, and I will type a password. So you can set a strong password, and I'll give the name here as well, admin, and email address is test@gmail.com. So you can give your correct email address, then click on save and continue. Now here you can see we got the Jenkins URL which we are accessing from here, and just click on save and finish. Now we are in the Jenkins ready stage, so just click on start using Jenkins. So now we are back into the same home screen of Jenkins, which we actually saw from our Windows installation as well. So it's the same Jenkins screen where we have the left side options where we have new item, people, build history, manage Jenkins, build queue, slaves, and all those things. And we have the front page where we can create jobs and agents and those kind of information. So before I get into the creation of jobs, let's discuss about a little bit of Jenkins architecture and also Jenkins master slave setup. Okay, so in Jenkins we can have different kind of setup, like simple Jenkins machine, which we are now set up a single machine which will act as our Jenkins master as well. In all the jobs will be running that, so it's like a centralized setup. You can also have a Jenkins distributed setup where you can have Jenkins slave. The slave machine can be Linux or also Windows or Mac. So those kind of machines can be added as a slave machine to your master Jenkins. So in that scenario, why we have to do this is because when we create jobs, the same single machine cannot run all the jobs. So in a bigger environment, you will have multiple jobs running at the same time. So single machine will not be able to run all the jobs simultaneously, and there will be different kind of environment we need. Some jobs we may need to run on Linux, some may need to run on Windows, some may be on Linux. So we may need different kind of environment as well. So because of that, we have to set up a slave setups. So we'll have one master machine which will do the scheduling of the jobs, which will communicate and give instructions to the slave and also monitor the slave. And the master also can build jobs, but usually it's we run all the jobs on slave if we have multiple slave scheduled for different kind of activities. And the Jenkins slave execute these jobs and also take commands from the master. So that's how the distributed structure will be. So for example, like when we create a job, you have a master Jenkins. We'll log into that website which we created, like Jenkins homepage. We'll create a job, but in the job we will mention that this job has to be run on this slave. And how you do that, it's basically based on the labels which we set. So let's see a little bit about the configuration of Jenkins master and slave, how to do that. So let's look into that. Now if you go to your Jenkins homepage, so you go to manage Jenkins, so you'll have an option called manage nodes and clouds. If you click on that, you will see this is your built-in node or your master node. So now the master node is renamed as built-in node, so that's why it says as built-in node. This is from the latest version of Jenkins. Now you can add new nodes from as part of our Jenkins. So you can click on new node and you can give some names, like I want to add Windows, so you can select Windows and permanent agent and click on OK. So now here you can define the description, what kind of node agent is it, and what is the directory. So I will use like C:* stem. So you need to give a directory where it can run, and you need to give a label for it. So I will give a label like Windows. So what is the benefit of label is, like once you give a label, you can define in your job any slave machine which matches this label should be used to run this job. So you can define that. I'll show you that also when we create a job. So that in that way, this label is very important, because with this label you can define on the job that this job has to be run only on the slave machine which this label is matches. Okay, and you can use this options, like if you want to run always as much as possible, or only run with label expression. So you can use this label expression, means only those jobs which have this label expression will be running. Otherwise, whenever a job is created, when the master will look for any slave machine which is free, and it will distribute it. But here, if you select this option with label matching, only the jobs which matches this label which we set here will be running on this slave. And you can use these options, like whether you want to launch the agent connecting to the control or using SSH, and you can select the command line. So you can have different options. So I will show you a tutorial where you can refer that, the link which is on my channel itself, which will tell you how to set up the slave completely on both Windows and Linux. So for example, here you have an option like the JNLP port is disabled, that's why you don't get this option. So if you go for the security configuration screen, you need to enable those options to a random or a fixed. I'll keep it random. Once you do that, and if you go back to your node, and if you go to your Windows, now if you see the agent is not connected yet, that's why you have this X mark. So in order to create the agent, you can use any of these options, like you can download this jar file, and you can move it to your agent machine, and you can run this command. So it will automatically create or connect it to this master. So let me show you how to do this master slave setup. If you go to my playlist for Jenkins in my channel, you have a clear detailed tutorial on setting up Jenkins master slave for Windows as a service, and also on Linux. So these two tutorials you can refer, which will give you complete step-by-step process how to create this jar file, what you have to do on your slave machine, how to create an SSH key on a Linux, how to configure that, all those things. So I'm not going to show that whole process in this tutorial, because this is a straightforward tutorial. I already have it. So you just refer that, and you should be able to get the complete information. I will link that detail also into this video description. Now we have details about Jenkins master slave setup. So you need to set up those master and slave based on your requirement. If you are going to run a lot of jobs, it's better you create more slaves, so you can run those slave machine used for your jobs. Now let's move on to create our first freestyle Jenkins job. So this will be our first job which we'll be creating in Jenkins. So here I'm going to go to the Jenkins homepage. So we already have Jenkins running. So if you are using Windows, use our first method to run Jenkins using war file. If you are using Linux, you can use this method to install Jenkins, and you should be on this screen. If you are using Mac, you can use the documentation I given. It's also the similar simple process. You just read the documentation and run that. Now I want to create a job. So you need to create a job, or you can click on new item. So it will take you to this screen where it's asked you to enter a item name, and you have options like freestyle, pipeline, multi-configuration, multi-branch. So we'll see about pipeline and multi-branch pipeline later of this video. First of all, I will start with creating of a simple job. So I will give a name called first job, sample first job. So, and I will select freestyle pipeline projects. Sorry, it's not a pipeline, freestyle project. So if you click on OK, it will take you to this screen. So you have on the top like general, source code management, triggers, environment, build, post action. So you can access the content by clicking on this, or you can just scroll down. So it will take you to those screens. For example, source code management, build, triggers. So it is the same thing. If you scroll down, you'll be getting the different headings. Okay. So the first thing is you can give a description of job. So I will tell this is a sample job, And you can see other options like discard all build GitHub project, this required lockable resource, this project is parameterized, throttle build, disable this project, execute current build, restrict the project can be run. So there are different options. And you also have a source code management. Git is default available because the plugin for Git was installed as a default plugin. If you want some other source code like Subversion, you have to install those respective plugins, so it will be available over here. And you also have build triggers, which we'll be talking later point, like build triggers remotely or build from other projects or build periodically, and GitHub webhook or SCM polling or poll SCM. So these all details we will see, and we also have build step, post build actions, right? So these are our simple Git projects. So what I want to do is I'm not going to use any Git content over here at this point. It's simple project I want to use, like I want to just run a simple command. So you can see we have built commands like Windows patch command for Windows machines. I want to run a shell because I'm using this Jenkins from Linux. So you can also see like and Gradle, Maven targets, right? So I'll use execute shell, and I'll just use echo. This is my first project, and I'll just click on save. Now if I go back to the dashboard, now you can see we have a first project available here. Previously we don't see any projects. Now you will start seeing the project listed over here based on the project which you create. Now you can select this project, you can use build now, you have a configure, delete, different options. You can also click inside the jobs. On the left side you will have options, similar thing like workspace, build now, configure, delete, rename, and all those information. And below you'll have the build history. So now we don't have this project run, at least not even once. So let me run it. So I'm just click on build now. Now you can see below the build history, you can see this project number 1. So that means this job has run once. And if you click on that, it can give you console output changes, or you can just click on that link. It will take you to the console output directly, and you can see the message. So it has been already run this command, and this is the output. This is my first project and the build is successful. So if this build was failed, this icon will be red and it will not be like green what currently you see. If I build it again, you will see this number 1 will become one more entry, which number 2. So there is this job has run the second time. So that's the basic information which you need to understand from a job perspective. What are the options available here? And this workspace is the where if you have some data like some jar or something which has to be saved, it will be available on this workspace. And this workspace, if you see, if I go to var lib Jenkins on my server, you should have different folders. So you'll have folders like plugins, nodes, secrets, right? Users, workspace. So if I go to this workspace, you should be able to see a folder called sample first projects. So this is the same project name which we have given for this project. So every time when you create a project, a folder will be created under workspace on that project name, and all the details for your project will be available inside that. For example, now this project only folder is there is no content because I have not downloaded anything into that folder. If I'm using GitHub and I'm using some content, it will be downloaded into that workspace. So that's the workspace is the place where you'll have all the data for your Jenkins, that project will be, or job will be saved. So that is great. So we created our first projects. Now let's see how you can schedule jobs in Jenkins. So scheduling is very important as part of Jenkins because nobody will keep sitting and creating your jobs every time by clicking on it. So there are different things you will do, like you will schedule some tasks to be run like at midnight or every day morning. So for that you will be using scheduling, and you will have to use cron expressions. So when you talk about cron, So cron expression, if you are not very clear, you should know like cron have different kind of sections or 5 parameters. So you'll have minute, you'll have hour, day of month, and day of week, and then it comes the command. So the cron command will be like, you can see like star 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 and the execute command, right? So the stars means like every day, every minute. The first star means every minute, for the second star means every hour, then every day, every month, and every day of week. And this star can be also getting value from 0 to 59. Star is like wildcard, so it can be any value, but usually you have to set like 0 to 59. Like if you want to run it every 5 minutes, you put 5, right? Then everything else should be star there. So you have to select the values based on whether it's a minute or hour, day of month or month, the day of the week. So you can select those values based on that, and then you have to give the command to execute. Now for simple some of the example, like if you want to run a job every day at 12 p.m. Noon, it is how it should be like. It should be like 0:12. That means 12 p.m. 0, that means 0 minutes. So it will be at 12:00 p.m. Star star. Then it will be every day it will be running. Then you have to, the next option, other example is like every minute starting at 1 p.m. and ending at 1:05 every day. If you want to run like that, you have to use this kind of cron job. So if you want to run every minute, so it should be like 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? So it should be 0-5. So it should run every 1 minute for till 5 minutes. Then it should be at 1 p.m. That means it's 13, and then it should be star star star. Okay, so that's what it says, like every day it should be running. Then you also have option like other example like 1:15 p.m. and 1:45. So you want to run only those 2 times every Tuesday of the month of June. So that means you'll have to use like 15 and 45 comma. You have to use comma, so that 2 minutes, 15 minutes and 45 minutes at the hour of 13. And you'll use every Tuesday, so it should be like Tuesday here and month of June, so that means it's 6. So every Tuesday it will be running. And other example is like at 9:30 a.m. on the 15th day of every month. So that this is another example, like you want to use 30 minutes of 9 o'clock and 15th day of every month. So this is how you have to create a cron expression. And what we do is like if I go to this job and if I go to configure again, so this job I want to convert into a scheduled job. That means then you have to go to build triggers, you have to select build periodically, and here you need to give a cron expression. So for example, I want to run this job every 2 minutes, so you can select like 2/2, and you can select rest of things as star star star, so it will be running every 2 minutes. So if I save this, you can wait for 2 minutes. Let's see if this is running or not. Now you can see I waited for a few minutes. It has run other job 12:04, then it's 12:06, right? So it is creating jobs automatically every 2 minutes. So you can check this cron. So you don't need to buy hard or anything. There are a lot of open website. You can just go and check what cron or schedule you have need. So based on that, you can give this schedule information. So every period what you have defined as part of your cron jobs. For example, if you want to run a job which is every day midnight, you can set that cron here. So every day midnight those jobs will be running in the Jenkins, as far as the Jenkins instance is up and running. So that's a simple way. So I will just disable this one for now. So that's a simple concept of scheduling jobs in Jenkins. Now let's also talk about remote build triggers. So let's go back to our Jenkins homepage. So we are back into our Jenkins homepage, and let's go to configure of our Jenkins job. And if you go back to the build trigger, you also see an option called trigger builds remotely, right? So if you select that, you can see you need to give a token. So you need to give a token name. So you can see use the following URL to build trigger remotely and equal to token name. So you can give a token called maybe sample project. So you can see this URL is Jenkins URL, then you have to give the job sample project build token equal to token name. So let me just copy this content and let me put it somewhere here so that I can use it for when we create once we create. So the token would be sample project, so I'll just save that and let me save it. And this Jenkins URL, so we need to just change the token name to sample project, and the Jenkins URL would be this one, right? So you need to select that and you need to put that in front. So the whole link would be like the Jenkins URL, then the job, this is the project name, build token equal to the token name which we created. So if I use this, if I run it, you should be able to see the jobs started. You can see the job as initiated. Now this can be run from any machine. So as far as the connection is there, you can just use this link and you can start the jobs remotely from any machines. That's how you can easily create or start the jobs remotely from other. You can use this link also in some other scripts, so that if you want to remotely start the job from other machines, you can use this link. So this is one of the way you can trigger the build. So you can use the trigger build remotely, you can use a token, and you can use the URL for creating or initiating the jobs from other machines. Now let's talk about parameterized job. We also have the webhook using through GitHub and Poll SCM, which I will show you. Poll SCM we can talk. We also have the GitHub webhook, which we will show you separately after this part, so that which we need to integrate with Jenkins. So let's talk about parameterized job first. If you go back to your Jenkins and your Jenkins job, go to configure. And if you have under your first description, below description, you have an option called this project is parameterized. So if you select this option, you have options to add parameters. So there are different parameters you can add. It can be a Boolean parameter, choice parameter, credentials, file, multi-line, password, run, string parameters, right? So let me use a simple string parameter. So I will use string, and I give as environment, and the default value may be prod. And if I just save this project, now if I go back to the project, now the build now has been changed with the build with parameters, right? So if you click on that, it will ask you to select the environmental which is default set as the prod, or you can give some other name value here. So that's the basis of the parameters, and you can use this parameter value into some process or somewhere you want to use it in your Jenkins job where you run the build, right? So you can use this value into there and you can build it. So if you see, I'm just building it, but as far as this content is not used anywhere, so it's not going to make any changes. But basically what you can do is you can use this value which we are setting, or which we are asking the people to enter at the time of running the job, which can be used for using in your build option. So you can print something over here, or you can use that value in the command which is coming here, and you can use that for your normal build process. So the string is one of the option. You also have other options like choice and other parameters. So let me give maybe again environment, and I will give choice like prod, and I will also give like dev, and maybe I will also give staging, and let me save this. Now if I go back again, build with parameters, now you see the choice. It give you drop down like prod, dev, stage. You can select that and you can build. So again, the values which is coming from these parameters, which you can use it for your Jenkins job. Now let's talk about Git Webhook and Poll SCM, which is a very critical and important topic as part of Jenkins usage, because basically what we do is when we have a Jenkins job, we set the options or webhook so that whenever there is a new commit in the Git, it will automatically triggers a job. So you don't need to create scheduled jobs, or you don't have to manually run these jobs. So you created a pipeline, or you created a job in Jenkins which need to take some actions, but that has to be done whenever there is a new change in the source code. So you create a commit in a web GitHub where there is a source code, that will be automatically detected by Jenkins and it will create a job. Sorry, it's start the job. It's not create the job, but job is already there. It will start the job and it will give you the output. So let me go back to the project or the job which we created on Jenkins, and let me make that a little bit different for our configurations. So if I go to the project or job, and if I go to configure, I want to remove this parameterized job, and I also want to use a source code now, because we need to use a source code which is a Git or Subversion or any kind of thing. So I'm going to use a Git, which can be GitHub or GitLab or any other source code. So I'm going to use a GitHub. So I'll go to my GitHub and I'm going to use a sample project where I have only a simple sh file which will run an output called this is my Jenkins full course tutorial, and testing is complete. So I will just copy this link and I will just put that link over here, and since this project is a public project, it will connect without credential. But now we are getting a message failed to connect to this repository because we don't have a git install on my Jenkins master. So I will use gem install git and I'll force it, so I don't have to give some confirmation. So let it install. So the git installation is completed, and if I go back to my screen and if I put the git repository, now that message is not coming because we have git available in the Jenkins machine to clone this repository. And you have to select the branches. So here it's by default it's saying master, but now if you see in Git, usually it will say as main. So you need to change the branch name to the respective. So I will change it to main branch so that it can use the content from the main branch. Now you have options called Poll SCM, and also you have called GitHub Webhook Trigger. So before Git Webhook, I will use Poll SCM, and this Poll SCM is similar to what we use as cron job. We need to give a cron duration here. So based on that cron, it will pull for the content from your Git location, which is your source code management or version control tool. So you can give the information like a cron information. So I will give star. So I will give it the expression for every 2 minutes, and I will just save this so it can download the content. And this execute shell, I'm not using any content from the Git, but I just want to use the Git to download the content every 2 minutes. So I will just save this, and we will wait for 2 minutes so that we can see the jobs running. Okay. Now if you see, last time we had only job 7, now we have a job 8, and if I go to the console output, you can see it has used the Git repository. From the Git repository, it has cloned the Git, but actually the content what it has run is this is my first project, right? If I go to this location for our workspace, var lib Jenkins and workspace, you should be able to see the same first project. And if I go to first project, you should be able to see the content of the my GitHub, which is the project.sh and readme.md, right? So you can see already the content is already cloned, and the poll SCM is running. Now let's go and check out the GitHub webhook. So for a GitHub webhook, I will create a new project, new job, and I will give a name as GitHub webhook, and I'll give as a freestyle project. And again, I will use the Git repository, which will be my Git repository for this, and I will use that repository here, and I will make it as a main branch. And here I will use the Git webhook repository. So in the GitHub, the plugin for webhook is already installed. That's why we are able to see the GitHub webhook, which comes along with our standard plugin installation. But if you are using GitLab, then you have to install the GitLab plugin to get the webhook option for GitLab. I hope that is clear. So GitHub webhook plugin is already installed. That's why we are able to see this option. But in case of GitLab, you need to install the plugin for GitLab. Now I'll go back and I'll give an execute shell, and here I will use my options, or in that build, since we have a file called project.sh, I want to run that file. So I will use /project.sh to be run at the time of build. Okay, so that's how I want to do it. So I will use /project.sh. that would be my build command. So let me save this file. Now in order to configure this GitHub webhook, so now if you see, I have selected GitHub webhook, right? If I read these instructions, you can see, like, when Jenkins receive GitHub webhook, it will start the build. So whenever you have a change, or when you have a commit in the Git, it will start the trigger over here. Now for doing that, what you need to do is you have to go to your Git project, you have to go to settings, and under the settings, this is inside the project, okay, not on the Git login. So it's the webhook is based on each project. So you go to your project, go to setting, and you have a webhook option. So I have already one created. I will delete this and I will create a new one. So I will create a new webhook. So I will click on add webhook, and this URL should be given, and the URL format should be like this. So the URL format should be your Jenkins URL and then your webhook. So the Jenkins URL will be http / if it's your IP address based on that, or if it's you have some other URL, you can use that. And GitHub webhook, that should be your link, or which has to be given here. And you also have multiple options which you can select here. If you see, by default it says like just the push event, like whenever there is a commit, it will send the push to the Jenkins to trigger the job. Now if you want to select some other option, like let me select the individual events. So like for example, you want to jobs to be started out, branch or tag creation or deletion. So you have multiple options you can create, like commands, deployment keys. So you have all these options in Git which you are doing. So in any of these changes you want to create a Jenkins job, you can select those options as well. So in my case, I just want to keep it with the just push event. I'll just add the webhook. Okay. Now if you see, when we add the webhook, it's giving a red icon, because if you see, it says unable to fail to connect to the host. So why? Because we are using our Jenkins, which is an internal IP, and GitHub cannot connect to that. So there is no public IP which we can map directly for this. So as a workaround, in my case, where you're in your corporate network or some places, your connection which is openly accessible to the internet, which can be accessible from internet, then you will not be facing this problem. You can directly create this webhook and it should start working. But in our case, since it's not a public IP, we need to use some other method. So what I will use, you will use something called ngrok, which will convert our IP into a public kind of domain where you can use. So in order to do that, I have to install ngrok. So I have to download the ngrok from the download link. So I will just copy this link, and I will go to the home location, and I will use wget, and this should be downloading in few minutes. So you can see like the ngrok stable version is installed. Now let me untar it. So let me untar it to see to the location /users local/bin. So let me untar it. Now you need to authorize the ngrok. So for that you need to log into ngrok web browser. You need to create an account, and you will have an authentication token. So I have an authentication token which I will use it here to authenticate, which I cannot share it in this tutorial. So I will just authenticate, and then we will go to the next step. So in order to authenticate, you can use ngrok authenticate, and you have the token ID which you can run. So I've already run the ngrok auth token and the token ID, so I'm already authenticated. Now I want to go to cd/user/local/local.bin, and you should have the ngrok. And I want to run the command ngrok http port 8080, so that I can convert my port 8080 connection with the local host to the outside network, which is like a public connection. Now you can see the local host port 8080 has been given like a domain like this. So I will just copy this, and if I go back to the browser, see, I'm able to access the Jenkins now just with this link, because whatever we are accessing with this IP address port 8080 is now just converted into this URL or the domain. So now I'm going to use that into our Git page, and I'm going to change that to this link. I don't need to specifically mention 8080 because that is included into this URL. So now let me just update the webhook, and let me check the webhook. Now you can see once we use that webhook using this URL, you can see it's connected now. Now I can go back to my project, and I will make some changes in the project. So I will just edit this, and I will make this testing. I will add this testing is complete. So it was before like testing is complete. I have added this testing is complete, and I will just do a commit. If I log into my Git, if I log into my Jenkins, you can see Git webhook, there is a job has been started already, but it has been failed. So let's see what is the content of it. Now if you see the console, it has failed because of permission denied, not because of any other reason. So the job is already started because of the commit. Now the job is failed because of the permission fail. So let me see. So for that I will just go back to my job, and I will just change this value. I'll just give a permission. So I will give chmod 774, and I will give to this project file, project.sh. So I'll just give a permission, then I will run it. So let me save this again. If I go back to my GitHub, and I will make a different commit. This is my second testing. I will change it like that. then I will do a commit. If I go back to my go back to my Jenkins, now you can see as soon as I do a commit, it started a new job, and you can see it has successfully completed as well. And you can see the output is this is my second testing, right? So whatever I change, it's coming up now. So if I go back and if I change once more, this is my third testing. I will commit again. If I go back to my Jenkins, you should be able to see the third job is immediately started. Now if I go back to this job status, you can see the console output. This is my third testing. So whatever the changes we had done, it is pulled into the Jenkins, and we are getting that output. So that's how you can configure the Jenkins webhook. So basically what you need to do is you need to configure the webhook here, the setting, and also in the GitHub you can need to settings, you need to go to webhook and you need to add the webhook here. And as I said, the configuration method, since I'm using internal IP, I have to use ngrok. But in your case, if your IP address is open, you can just directly create the webhook using the GitHub webhook. If in case of GitLab, it's similar way, you need to go to the job and you need to create a webhook, but the content, it will not be the same as it is. For that, I will show you a reference video. If you go to my playlist for Jenkins, you have a video here called Jenkins GitLab Webhook Periodic Poll SCM. This video has clearly explained how you can configure Poll SCM and webhook using GitLab and Jenkins. So you can follow this if you want to configure the GitLab webhook. Now moving on to our next topic, which is Jenkins Maven integration. So now we have seen a Git project, simple project. Now let's move on to some project called Java project, which you want to build it on your Jenkins using continuous integration. So basically for building a Java project, you need to a build tool, which is Maven or Gradle and those kind of tools has to be needed. Whereas in case of .NET project, you may need a MS Build tool. So we are going to do is we are going to use a small Java Spring Boot or some kind of project where you have a Java code and we want to build that. So into a WAR file or jar file at the end. So let's talk about Maven. So in case of Maven, you're going to use, you need to understand Maven goals or Maven lifecycle. So Maven, you have a different goals or stages where you need to use it when you are building your project. So for example, you have a different stages called validate, initialize, a lot of things. So basically we have some important goals like clean, then compile, package. We also have test, you have install, deploy, verify. So these are some of the important goals. So what we do is when we create our Jenkins job, we'll be using some of goals like MVN clean or MVN clean install or MVN package or MVN test. So those kind of goals we will be using in our Jenkins. So before we get into the actual process of Java and Java project, which we will be using in our Git. So I'm going to use simple project called Spring Boot Hello World. So it's a simple project, so it's nothing. You'll have a small Java files which will give you an hello output as output. So that's a simple project which I want to use for this tutorial for integration. So but before we do this integration, we also need to have some dependency softwares installed on the Jenkins. In order to run Maven, you need to have a Maven installed on the Jenkins master. So I'll use or the slave, whichever machine on which the job is running. So I will install Maven first. So I will use yum install Maven so it can install the Maven components. So let's wait for that to be completed. So the installation is completed. So you can see MVN version. You should be able to see the Maven version install on the machine. Now what also you need to see is you need to also check the Java home and Maven home. So you can see the Java home is blank. Also, if I go back, if I select Maven home, both are blank. So now we need to set these things for Jenkins to work correctly. So you need to go to the file vi. So before that, let me see where the Maven is installed under this location, and let me also see where the Java is installed. You can also see the Java is installed over here. Open JDK. You can see this is the word user slash JVM. You have two Java. One is Java 11 and also Open JDK 1.80 JRE. So we can use this Java. So based on which we need, we can set up. Okay. So let me go back to the VI file, which is called VI editor, and it's called the file we want to access etc profile. So if you access this file, you can see the whole little bit of content here. So first of all, I'll just copy this path for bin. So I will just copy this content, and I will go to this file, and we need to add it over here so that the path will be accessible. So I will put it here just below export path. So I will put export. The name should be Java underscore home. Should be equal, and this should be the location. I also want to put a path variable, so I'll put export path equal to Java home slash bin. Now let me also export Maven home, so I should put Maven underscore home equals, it should be under user share Maven. So I will just save all these things, and then I will source this profile. So once I source it, then I can check the variables Java home. You can see the content is there, and I also want to Maven home. So both is set correctly. So now we are set up correctly from the configuration side. Now if I go back to my Jenkins, I will create a new project, and I will call this as a Maven job, and I will just use a freestyle job, and I will go back to the Git repository, and I am going to use this Git repository where I have my Spring Boot project, and I will go back again. I will make this as main. Then I will go back to the build triggers. I don't want to do any build trigger because this more integration side. So here, if I want to use the build step, I want to use invoke top level Maven target. So I will use the goal, like as I mentioned, the Maven have different kind of goal. So you can use like MVN test, or you can have package, or it can be install. So here I will use simple test. So let me use a test, and I will or maybe I'll just use a compile one first, then we can go some other. So I will use a compile, and I will just save it, and let me build this job. So we have some errors. So you can see couldn't find any version or build repository. So it's because the repository here, if you see, the repository is master, not a main. So I'm not sure, some repository is using main, some is using master. I think there's a name change in the gate. So now here I will change it back to master, and let me save it, and let me build. And if I go back to the console output, we should be able to see the process which is happening. You can see it has run the job or the goal MVN compile. So it's compiling it, and we should be able to get an output at the end. So and each Java project which will have a file called pom.xml, which will define all this process, like what kind of plugins, what is the goals, all these dependencies, everything will be already defined in the pom.xml. So this is not a tutorial on pom.xml or Java, so I'm not going to define more about that. Now if you see, the project or the job is successfully completed and the source files are available in this location. So if I go back to this location in my workspace, you can see there are the example, the index or the class files and everything will be created over here. Now we also see, let me go back to the workspace, cd/var/lib/jenkins/workspace. You have this project called Maven, and if you see, you have also a folder called target now. So basically in our GitHub you have only src and main, so there is no target. So the targets it get created as part of our build process. So if I go back to cd target and maybe classes, so basically the target folder, we don't have any var file created yet because we only did a compile. So let me change this goal. I will change this goal back to a different one. So I will change this from mvn compile to mvn package. So let me package this so that I can get a file, the var file out of it. So let me run it again. So we are running the job once again. Let's go to the console output. So this time this mvn goal, it will run the compile, it will also do a testing. If you see, it's running actually the testing phase now, and then it will also do the package. So once you call the final goal, it will run the previous goals as well as part of Maven goal. Now if you see that this time also it got success. So let me go back to my target, and if you see, now you have a file called hello.var. So this time if you do a compile, it has converted your application into a var file. So that's how your overall build process will happen. Now you can use this var file and you can put it to your Artifactory. If you want to push it to some web server, you can push it to that using another Jenkins job, which will be using like Ansible or Docker or some kind of deployment method where we can deploy that into those infrastructure. So that's how the overall continuous integration happens. So this just want to show you like how you can make use of a simple Java application for building your using Maven. So you can also use other application like other build tools as part of your what kind of project you are doing. We will also see how we can make use of like Jenkins Pipeline in upcoming sections, because we just started now with basics and now we are doing the Maven compile. Now we will also see the pipeline job in Jenkins. There we will see how we can write pipeline jobs for making these kind of activities. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is about creating users. So let's see how we can create more users in Jenkins. If you go back to your home page in Jenkins and you go back to manage Jenkins, you also have under security called manage users. So currently we have only one user ID which we created as part of our user login as part of Jenkins creation. So when we install Jenkins, it asks us to create an admin account. So this is the admin user. Now we don't want to give everybody the admin access. So for that we need to create some other users. So for us, let me create some users. So let me create a few users. I will use as a test user 1, and I'll set some password. So you can see we created a new user. I will also create a few more users. So I have created 2 users. So I have admin and the other 2 more users. So now I can log out from this account. I can log in with the test user. Now if I log in with the test user, you can see still this user have complete access, just like an admin, where I can see all the jobs. I have all the manage Jenkins options. I have the complete access. So basically you don't want a normal test user to get all these access. So what you have to do is you have to do a restriction over there, right? And also it's not possible that you can also create each users one by one all the time. So there is also, you have options where you can configure your user accounts. So now if you see, go to global configure global security, what we are using is like Jenkins own user database, right? So whoever what we create manually is the Jenkins own users database. We are not allowing users to sign up. So only if we create or some user account is already there in Jenkins, those accounts users will be able to access it. But you can also use LDAP. So you can use LDAP and you can use your Active Directory server and port details. So using that, you can give users access. So that whenever you have a user account and you can set up some configuration based on some group, so those users will be able to log into the Jenkins based on your LDAP as well. So I will keep the same Jenkins on user at this point. Now in order to restrict the access for users, we also need to configure a role-based access control. So let's see how that can be done. Now if I go back to configure global security, you go back to the authorization, you can also see some settings over here. Anyone can do anything, logged in users can do anything, right? So here what we have selected is logged in users can do anything, means every user who logged in have the full rights like an admin. But you may need to have some restrictions. So you already have some of the options like metric based security, where you can select, you can add users over here and you can restrict it. But what I want to show you, like you also have project based restriction, but what I'm going to show is like there is another plugin which you can install. So if you go back to manage Jenkins, and if I go to manage plugin, and if I select role based authorization strategy, so you need to select this plugin. So if you go back to that page, you should be able to read the instructions, like how you can manage and assign roles and all those things. So let's select this plugin and install it. So I'm going to just install it. So you can see it's pending. So let's wait for the installation to complete. So it's done. Now if I go back to my manage Jenkins and configure global security, now you should be able to see another option called role based strategy. So here I can select this option, and if I save it, and if I go back to Jenkins, so in manage Jenkins, you may see there is a new options came up like manage and assign roles. Now here you can create your own roles, you can assign those roles. So first thing is you have to create a role. So what you may want to do is you want to add a role where people can access only jobs. So you can add those role, or maybe you can add a ops role. So whoever is having part of ops team can get this access. So I'm going to create an ops role who will have access to some of these contents. So maybe you want to have full access for jobs. So I'll just give all these things, run the jobs, view the jobs. So that should be the ops role. And maybe you also want the dev role. So I will add dev role. maybe the dev I just want to only view. And you can save it. You also have other roles, like you can create item roles like based on that as well. If you go back to the manage Jenkins and manage and assign role, now you go back to assign roles and you can add users into some roles. So let me add those test user 1, and I will also add it's test user 1, and test user 2. So those user I will add it. So I want to add the test user 1 as part of ops team and test user 1 of dev team, and I will save that. Now if I go back and I will log out from this, and let me log in with test user 1. So you can see the test user. If you log in, you should be able to see the jobs, but you don't see the manage Jenkins, all those options, because we are not given the administrator options. And if you see, I will be able to run the job. No, we are not able to run the job because we don't have that option to run the job. Let me see. Let me log out. Let me see test user 2. Now for this test user, if you see, this user does not even see the jobs. So based on the configurations what we set, so let me log in again. So now if you go back to this roles, so it's based on the roles what we have set. So now if you see the jobs, based on what you can see, it's based on that it will be able to create. So you need to check what configurations you have set for each users, and based on that it will get applied. Now if you see this job, we have not selected the build and cancel, so I will select the build and cancel also into the ops team. So let me apply this, and if I log out and I will log in with the test user 1 again, I'm able to see the job, and now you can see the build option is up. So based on what configurations you are set, you should be able to control the permissions for these users which are accessing Jenkins. So this is very important because you don't want to give access for all users based on what they are using, or what is their actions, or what they want to do with Jenkins. You need to control based on their roles. Now let's move on to Jenkins configure system. Let's talk about some of this contents in the Jenkins configure system, which is helpful for you to understand. So if you go back to your Jenkins home and you go back Jenkins, manage Jenkins, you have multiple options like configure system, global tools, plugin. So we already spoke about a lot of these options. Now let's go back to configure system. So this is one of the important place where you'll have to you make use of some of the content which will be useful for you. So now if you see the configure system, the home directory, so this is the place where we have the workspace and everything which will be defined here. And you can also use the system message. So for example, I want to say hello, welcome to the tips for you. If I save this message will be shown on top of here. So now you can see this is information which if you want to show anybody who is logging into Jenkins, you can use this system message place where you can inform. So now you can see it's a plain text, that is why it is showing like this, but you can change these options in the, I think it's under configure. Yep. So now you can see this to save HTML. I will save this, and I can go back and I can use some head tag here. So maybe I'll use H1, and I will close the tag, And if I save this, you can see this has become like an HTML page. So you can use this system information if you want, system message, if you want to send some communication or information to all Jenkins users. Now this number of executors is like how many jobs can run. So it depends basically if you want to set 2 executors or 3 executors. I would suggest like you can check about your system CPU. So if you don't have enough cores, based on that you set the executors. If you have only 2 cores or 3 cores, you don't set for 6 or 4, because it will overload when you run the jobs. So it will try to run more jobs which it cannot run with the CPUs available. Now you can also set labels as we discussed, so that so when you set the labels, you can call those labels as part of your jobs, so that these jobs can be run only on those nodes where this matches the labels. So you can use selector options like use this node as much as possible, or just only with the label expression. And you can also use quiet period, so that it says like when this option is non-zero, newly built trigger of this will be added to the queue, but Jenkins will wait for a specific period of time before starting this build. So you can see a quiet period. So even though a job has been added, it will just wait for a short period before it can start the job. And this is for SCM checkout. So if you want to set something, like if you want to retry the checkout for Git or something, you can use that. So you can also use this pattern for creating the jobs. So when you want to set a restriction on the names which is getting created, you can use the pattern. Like if you want to create only the naming convention, like you want to use only test jobs or jobs with the specific pattern, you can use this pattern and description. So you can use that method into that also for restricting. And this one, it says the Jenkins URL which we are using into login. And you can use some email address for system admin email address. And let's go a little bit down, so you can also see some of other statistics usage, how it is done. And you can also use like time, like what the timestamp it is using currently. So if you want to make some time format, you can use that as well. And there are other parameters like GitHub servers, pipeline libraries, enterprise. So there are a few other configuration if you want to use. And you will also see about this email information later point in another section, where we'll be talking about email, how to set up email. So when a job is failed, so we'll talk about that later. And you can also see this email notification. So all these things we will cover it in the later part of tutorial. So I just want to show you like some of the parameters what you see it on this configure system. And you can also see like global tools configuration. This is also an important place where you will be updating a lot of your tools. So Git we already installed, so it has already taken the Git executables, and even the Maven it has already taken. But if you want to add some tools, not only just manually, you can also select like install automatically. So when Jenkins run, it will automatically use those things as part of installation. So that's also a place where you can configure those things. Great. Now let's talk about email notifications. Why we need to send email notification? Because when we create jobs and we run some CI/CD pipeline, right? So you have some actions which is happening, and if you find some of those actions are getting failed, for example, you have a build job, then you have a test job, then you have something to deploy, but in between the testing it got failed. So you need to have some method of communicating that build failure to you. So for that you can use email notification, you can use Slack, or you can use different method to do it. So let's see how you can configure email notification in Jenkins. So if you go back to your Jenkins dashboard, so there are two things which you have to do. One is like you need to have a global configuration for your SMTP and all those things. Then you need to configure your job to send the email trigger. So let's check the manage Jenkins. If you go to configure system, then inside the configure system, if you scroll down, you will have an option called email notification. So this is the standard email notification, but if you want a more detailed one, you need to install a plugin called extended email notification. So since we already got it installed along with the standard plugin, you have this option. So both are almost same, but the extended email notification will have more options, like you can make a lot of changes, like how the subjects should be, what attachments, how the content of the email should be. So you have more options available in the extended email notification. Whereas in the normal email notification, it's very simple. You can only have a few details. So I would suggest you can use extended email notification, so you can configure your the email. How do you want to see, what attachment you want to get. So what you can do is you can configure your SMTP first. So if you are using your email notification, first you need to give your SMTP server. So if you are using your organization email, so you need to find the SMTP server and you have to give that details and the port number for that. Whereas if you are using Gmail or anything, you can use smtp.gmail.com. So you can write smtp.gmail.com and you need to give the port number for Gmail, which is 465. So once you give this SMTP server and the port number, you also need some method to authenticate. So you need to use this, the credentials or SMTP authentication for that. So you need to create your email authentication. For example, if you want to send some email, you need to have an access to this SMTP server. So if you go back to your normal email authentication, if you can see, if you go to advanced, you can use SMTP authentication and you can give your email address, username and the password, because unless you give that, it will not be able to authenticate. Whereas in this one, you can simply create a credential and you can use that to authenticate. And also you can use advanced email properties, all those configurations you can use when you are creating the email. So let's save this. Now the next option is, if you go back to your job, so let's go back to configure. So what you need to do is, now the SMTP section is configured. Now you need to tell the job when it has to send to what. So we already seen the content of build. So build will run the job what we have defined, like what it has to do. Now what the status of the build, whether it's failed or it's passed, it doesn't matter for the job, which will just complete it and it will give you the output. So what you need to do is you need to add a post build action. Now you can see we have options like email notification, and you have editable email notification. So this email notification is used for the standard one. The editable email notification will be for the extended email notification. So you can select this. So once you select this, you can see you will get more options like what has to be done. So here you can create like a project from. So you can see, like, you can also give the recipient list, like if you have a distribution list or anything, you can give it the details. You can also give some subject line, the content, what it has to do. If you want to attach something in the email, you can configure that as well. Now you can see you can define the triggers, like what kind is going to be the failure. So you can see there are different kind of triggers. So it can be like aborted, always, before build also you can have email trigger. It can be at the first failure, or you don't want to create it in the first failure, you only want to send email in the second failure, so you can use that. And you also have other script after build, not built, status, success also you can send email. So there are a lot of triggers which you can use it to send the email. So you select the triggers and then you can add to whom it has to be sent. So you can send, you can create a recipient list and you can add it, or you can, different configurations you have it. So based on that, you can create and you can send the email. So I'm not going to show you how to send it, because Gmail, you need to give a little bit more authentication, because when you send the email through app like this, it will ask you whether you want to give a confirmation to give access for Jenkins to these apps. So what I would suggest you, like, you go to my Jenkins playlist. I have a detailed email on how to configure for Gmail, so you can refer this video. And also if you want to configure, the or not you want to use email, if you want to use Slack, you can also use Slack to send communication. So you have both videos over here, so you can refer them and you can make use of. I will give the link for that also in the video description. Now let's move on to the Jenkins pipeline. So we are going to get into a little bit more depth. So now you got a complete idea on what is Jenkins, how to create simple jobs, what are the configuration you have it, how to send email notification when there is a build failure, how to create users, how to give control for role-based access for these users. So all those things you have understood. Now let's talk about Jenkins pipeline, which is really important as part of Jenkins. So if you want to know what is a Jenkins pipeline, so basically Jenkins pipeline is nothing but it's like a suite of plugins which supports this implementation and the integration of continuous delivery pipeline in Jenkins. So what do you mean by, like, if you have a lot of process, right, you want to have a Maven build first, then you have to do a testing, then you want to have a Sonar Cube, then you want to have pushing this war file into Artifactory. So all those things you are integrating with a lot of plugins, and you're writing those into a expression, so that it can go through like a pipeline or a process flow. So that is what it's going to do as part of Jenkins pipeline. So a continuous delivery pipeline is an automated expression for your process to getting your software from version control right through your users to the customer. So writing this pipeline, you will have a complete automated process starting from user to the end customer, which is the source code which are in the version control. It will go through the whole pipeline process, whether it's building, whether it's testing, whether it's going to be another testing, then it has to go for some saving into the web pages for testing, or it can be moved into Artifactory for a binary, then it has to be go to staging servers, then it has to go to deployment. All those things we will write as part of continuous pipeline, and it will end up into the customer as a production. So Jenkins pipeline provides an extensible set of tools for modeling simple to complex delivery as a code. So what we are done in the normal job is you are clicking on the job, you are writing the build steps in there, where you will be doing simple steps like that, or you will have to create each job, like you want to have a build job first, then you want to have a test job, then you want to have another job for deployment, and you will link all those things one by one, so that one job is completed, it can start the other one. Whereas in the pipeline you are writing all those things as a code, and you will have the complete code in the same job, so that it will create as a pipeline where it will run each step by step or parallelly based on the configuration how we did, and it will provide you an output as a complete whole end-to-end process. So the definition of Jenkins pipeline is typically written into a text file which is called Jenkinsfile. This also we will talk in the later part of this tutorial. So Jenkins pipeline can be written normally in the job, or it can be used like a text file called Jenkinsfile, which will be stored in the project source control repository. So that also we will see a later part of it, like what is Jenkinsfile and how to make use of Jenkinsfile for our CI/CD or integrating with Jenkins. So now move on to, there are two kind of Jenkins pipeline. So there are two types of Jenkins pipeline code. One is declarative pipeline, another one is scripted pipeline. So we'll also see like what are the little bit difference of this. So majority people are using declarative pipeline, which will have start with the pipeline syntax, and then you will have stages, you will have nodes, you will also have steps what we do. Whereas scripted pipeline, like if somebody using Groovy or some kind of scripts, they will use scripted pipeline, which will be a little bit different from the declarative pipeline. But ultimately the end of the job is like it has to run the whole pipeline concept. So if you see the pipeline concept, what you will have is you will have a whole bundle of pipeline script, and you will also mention like what kind of agent or node you want to send this job. So you'll also define that in the pipeline script. You also define some stages, and inside that stages you will have multiple stage, and each stage will have steps which you will define like what has to be run on each step. So we'll see all those things as part of this hands-on. So now let's go and create our first Jenkins pipeline job. So let's get started with that. I will also link this documentation from directly from Jenkins, which talk about what is Jenkins pipeline, what is Jenkins files, how to create a pipeline, and there are some of examples how to write pipeline, like you have to give with pipeline syntax, whether it's a declarative or if I go back to the scripted, you can see there is a difference how it is written from the Jenkins declarative pipeline and the scripted format. So this difference you can view it there itself, and you will be able to do that. Now if I go back to the Jenkins dashboard, let's create a new job, and now let me call this as a pipelines job. And here this time you should not select freestyle job. You have an option called pipeline. You have to select this option and you have to click on OK. Now if you see, you don't have the option for Git, those kind of things, because you have to write all those things in the pipeline script. Now if you go to this build advanced options, you can see you have definition called pipeline script. There are two options, one is from pipeline script or pipeline script from SCM. So when you select pipeline script SCM, what does that mean? Like it's a Jenkins file, like you are saving the whole pipeline code as a text file in your source repository. Now here what we will try to do is we will try to use the pipeline script, so you can write the script in this screen itself. Now if you go scroll down, you also have something called pipeline syntax. So if you click on that, it will take you to this screen where it will help you to create your syntax. Now for example, I want to create a Git syntax, how to make use of that in the pipeline. So if I want to use this GitHub code, and if I want to use that to pull the code as part of the job, so you can see it's the main. So let's make it to main. And we don't have any, it's a public one, so it's simple. And if you click on generate, you can see it will create script. So you can just copy the script and put it into the steps. Now let's get started writing some content over here. Now the declarative pipeline start with pipeline and the curly brackets. So this is how the declarative pipeline will start. So now if you see, we need to have, after the pipeline, you can define whether it's any agents we are using or in which slave we want to run it. So you can define like agent any. So the agent any, we need to give the agents, like whether you want to run it on any agents. Then we have to give the stages, like how many stages you want to have it in this pipeline script. So you can write stages. Then inside the stages you will have stage, and you need to give a name for the stage. So let's give a name for the stage. So I will call this as git clone. So this name will be displayed when you're running your pipeline job. And inside the stage you need to give steps. So inside the step you can define the script which we just created. So I will just copy this and put it inside here. So this will use this script to pull this git project. So it will be using this script. Now if I want to create other stages, so you need to create other stages under this. So I will just copy this content again. I will just move it here, and I will put one more stage. Copy this content and put it here. So I will call this as test stage or test. And under the steps I will just simply remove this, and I will put simple echo command testing completed, and I will just put this one once again, and I'll call this as build. and I'll put this as build completed. So it's a simple job. Then I'll just save this and let me run this job now. Somehow the job got failed. Let me see. Yeah, I think it's because of the name what we have defined. So let me go back to the job and let me configure it. So you need to give a single quotes for the name. Let me save it and let me build it again. Let me open the status of the job. Now you can see it's trying to clone. So you can see it's cloning the project. Then you can see it has run the next jobs, testing completed and build completed and finished job. Now if I go back to the job, if you see this time it shows a different kind of screen, right? It shows 3 stages. One is for the first stage for git clone, the test and build. So this is what it is called pipeline. Like you have a different pipeline job which will go stage by stage, and it will also show you like how much second it's taking for each job to complete that. So this way you will be able to easily write your whole CI/CD pipeline. So first stage will be completed, and if you have something dependency for second stage, it can call for this. If some first stage is failed, you can have a post action in the first stage itself, so it can send some email to notify that the first stage itself is failed. Then it will not go for the next stage. So all those things you can define it in this pipeline job itself. So congratulations, we have created the first pipeline job. It's pretty simple, right? And you can also go to this documentation where it will tell you about the pipeline syntax, how to write the pipeline job. So it will give you a lot of information, like what all different options you have, like how to write the agents or nodes, how the labels which you need to use, different all those information. If you want to use Docker, all those things will be Kubernetes, all those things will be defined in this pipeline syntax. So I will also give that also into this video description. Now let's move on to create the same pipeline job for our Maven Java project using Jenkins Pipeline. So previously we have seen a simple project where we build our Maven script, Maven jobs, where it has compiled and we have got some output, right? Now let's use the same project where we can do a Maven job where we can use the GitHub. You can create test, compile it, you can test it, then you can package it, you can if you want you can even deploy that into a Docker or Kubernetes. So we will see how to do that. So let's go and get doing that in this part of tutorial. So going back to this Jenkins dashboard, I will create a new job called Maven Pipeline, and I'm going to create the pipeline and I'm going to create this job. And let's go to advanced properties. So as we discussed, the first one is called pipeline, and you need to have a curly bracket. Then you will have to have agents. So since we are not using any slaves, you can use agents any, or you can even use agent none. Then you have stages, and then you have stage. And again, this stage, what we are going to use is we are going to git clone for cloning our project. So I'm going to clone the project, so which will be for our GitHub, the Java project. So let me use this, and we are going to have steps, and we are going again back to the syntax, and this time we are going to use a different project. So we are going to use this hello world project, and we are going to put that over here on creating the syntax. So it has given this syntax, just copy that and put it here. So if you have using a private repository, don't worry, you just create the credential and you use that. Once you generate it, it will automatically update the script with that as well. So now we have this stage for git clone completed. Let me just copy this and let me put it again. Now we want to use Maven test, so I want to use a test, so I will call here mvn test. Then the next stage I want to have a Maven package, so I will use Maven package, so we'll have our var file get created. And the next stage I want to do is I want to build this one. Yeah, if you see you have something wrong, so it's called, we cannot use the same names again, so I want to use build, Maven build, and the mvn package. Now you can see I will use Maven deploy, and I will just put an echo command here. Deploying the var file to the server. So I'm not going to do that here. So you also need to you cannot directly run the mvn, you need to have a shell, so I will use it as shell mvn test, and you also have to do the shell here mvn package. So now it should be fine. So let's see, let me save this pipeline and let me build it. Now if I go back to the stages, and if I go back to the project, you can see the stage, it's doing something and it's failed. So let's see what it's doing. So you can see rest of the all jobs are failed. So let me go back and see why it has failed. Yeah, the reason here it says the goal you specified require a project to execute and there is no POM file. So if I go back to here, it's called master, whereas we have used here main. So I want to change this to master again, and let me generate the script. So I will just use this git command. I will go to my job, I'll correct this. So you need to be very careful on all these things, how the git and all those things, but no worries, the Jenkins give you the complete information why it has failed. So let me build it again. Let's see what it does. Now you can see it's trying to run the mvn test. If I go back to the jobs, now you can see it's running the second stage. Let's wait for the full job to be completed. Now you can see it's running Maven build, and then it's going to deploy. So currently we are not going to deploy anything as it's a dummy stage, but you can also deploy to Docker containers or Kubernetes, those kind of things. So now you can see it has completed the whole job, and if I go back, you can see the whole deploying the var file to the test, which is var file to the server. That's the deploying stage, the dummy stage, which is also completed. And you should have this var file in this location. You can see the var file should be there in this file. You just need to copy that to the server, which you need to do. And I would also request you go back to this my Jenkins playlist, where I have clearly shown how to deploy this var file into a Tomcat server running on Docker. So you will also see this my GitHub link, where I have shown complete image, how to create a Docker image, Docker file, and I copy this var file to there, and then you create a Tomcat instance and you run this as a web app. So all those things you will be able to learn from this playlist as well, which I will link into this video description. Now let's move on to another important topic, how to run Jenkins on Docker. So when we started this tutorial, we shown you how to install Jenkins on Windows as a var file or MSI. You can also install it on Ubuntu or Linux or Mac. So we can do all those things. Now let's also see how we can simply create Jenkins containers on Docker. So for this you need to install Docker, and then you need to create the container. So let's see that how we can do it in a CentOS machine. So I have this CentOS machine and I don't have a Docker installed. So you can see Docker is not available. So the easiest way to do is there is a simple single line command to install Docker. Or you can also go to this documentation from Docker and you can follow this instruction how to install through repository and yum command. But I will do with a simple command, single line command, So you just need to simply run this command curl, and you need to get this script from this the get.docker.com, and you just need to run it. So I will just run it. So you can see it's by default it will run all the script, which is basically telling the same thing in the Docker documentation. So let's run that, and we will wait for this installation to be completed so that Docker will be available on our CentOS machine. So you can see it's doing the same process what we have seen it in the documentation, like utilities, it's adding the repo, then it's installing Docker C, the latest stable version. So let's wait for this to be completed. So now you can see the installation is completed. So it's if you want to run the Docker daemon in fully privileged, then but granting non-root user access, you need to refer this as well. So let's clear out the screen and let's see the Docker version. Now you can see Docker is installed. So if I use systemctl status Docker, you can see the Docker service is there, but it's not running. So I will use systemctl start Docker, so it should be started after that. So if I go back and status, you can see the status is running. So now the Docker is running, we can create the container for Jenkins. So basically you need to know a little bit of commands like Docker commands. So if you don't know, you can also refer to my Docker playlist, which I have given around 5 to 6 hours of video, where it's completely talk about the basics from Docker to high-end Docker stack, Docker Swarm, and all those things are discussed there, and how to create containers and all those things you will be able to understand from there. So I'm not going to talk about the commands here. So we'll create the container for Jenkins, then we'll try to access that using our web browser. So the simple command is like we have to use docker container run or docker run, and you need to give a name for this container. So I will call it as Jenkins, and I'm not going to run it in detached mode. If you want to run it detached mode, you need to give -d, and I will also map the ports. So in our case, we already have a instance running from Jenkins in under port 8080 from this system. So I will use 9090 from the system, and from the container it should be 8080. So you can use in Docker, you can use different port mapping from the system to the container, and you can also use different kind of volumes, which we will see in the later part. So let's try to create a simple Docker container for Jenkins, and I'm going to run the image. So if you don't know which image you have to run, you can go and check in the Docker hub. You will be able to see the images for all the applications, and you can use that image to create the containers. So if you run this now, since the image is not available locally, it will download the image first, then it will try to create the container. So you can see it's downloading the image first. So let's wait for the image to be downloaded, and it will create the container. So now you can see the Docker container has been created, and it's still showing like we need to access with the initial password, which will be under this location inside the container. Since I'm running in a non-detached mode, we are able to see these outputs on the screen itself. So I also would like to run a firewall exception for the port 9090, otherwise we will not be able to access this web page from outside. So I have a different instance or shells command instance for the same machine, and I'm going to run this firewall command to add the port 9090 in the exception for firewall, and then I will reboot the firewall, and let me reload the firewall. So I will just run that. Now if I go back to the browser, and access this web page using 104.1990, you can see we are in the similar kind of home page where we seen it in our installation for Windows and Linux, right, previously, where we need to give the access code for the initial admin password. So let's just copy this, and let me go back, let's paste this one, click on continue, and we will be asked the same kind of instructions where we need to select the plugins, and let's wait for this to be completed. Considering the time, what I will do is, meanwhile that installation is going on, I will just show you like in Docker PS, if you see this container for Jenkins is running. And now the challenge here is like we don't have this our workspace and everything accessible from this machine, which actually we need to log into this container and then we need to access it from inside the container. So if something happens for this container, all our data is lost. So for the benefit of keeping our persistent volume, where we can map our storage or the workspace and the Jenkins home, so that we should be able to save all the data locally on the system. So even this container is destroyed, we can create another container and map that volume into that. So let's see how to do that. So I will stop this installation and I will go back and delete this container, so that because you already know what the steps which we need to do after this screen, so I don't want to re-show it. So if I go back to Docker PS, you don't have a container running, but you should have a dead container. So I can remove this container. So I will remove docker rm and I will just run this container. So it's done. Now what we need to do is, let's talk about how to create a persistent Jenkins data volume in this our container, so that we can save our whole content of data into our persistent volume. Then we should be able to access those data when, or even though these containers are dead or it's been corrupted or it's been deleted, we should be able to map those details into a different container as well. So this time what I'm going to do is, I'm going to use docker run and I'm going to name this container again as Jenkins. And then I'm going to run detach mode and I'm going to use port 9090 and from the container 8080. And I'm also now going to use another parameters like mount or volume, so that you can map something your destination and also from source. Like source will be from your local host and the destination should be your inside the container, what it has to be mapped to your local host. So I'm going to use mount source equal to Jenkins underscore data, and the target should be var Jenkins home. So I'm going to use this one so that I can create a mount volume, so that it can map those things into the Jenkins home from the container. So we should be able to access these things from inside the local host itself. You can also use like -v, and you can use like -v, and you can use Jenkins own volume. Then you can use the home page or home directory from your Jenkins. So you can see like we will use Jenkins own volume, and then you can map the location from inside your container to that volume. Then we can run the image for your Jenkins. So I will run the command. So now you can see, since the image was already available, it has created the container quickly, and you can see it is running. Now if I go to docker volume ls, you can see there is a volume created called Jenkins data, which will be under cd var lib. I think it's under docker volumes. Then you can see you have this volume for Jenkins data. So you can go to Jenkins data and you should be having underscore data, and you should get all the details of your Jenkins home here. Like you can see the plugin secrets, war files, jobs, and you will also get the workspace once we create the jobs. So now this is all accessible from your local machine itself. So that's how you can create the persistent volume of your Jenkins. So you can have all the data available inside your local host, and if you want to take a backup, you can use this one. Even though this container is destroyed, you can use the same volume and map it to the new container, so that it will automatically use these values and it will run from the current state. So was that pretty simple, right? So now let's talk about Jenkinsfile. We are done from the Docker container. I don't want to talk more about Docker perspective, so you can refer my Docker tutorials on that, and you have quite some tutorial on running Docker Jenkins on Docker, and also running Jenkins on Kubernetes. All those things are available in the tutorial. Now let's talk about Jenkinsfile. So as we discussed earlier, the Jenkinsfile is the text format of your Jenkins pipeline. So you'll be creating a Jenkins the pipeline script, whatever you're creating in the Jenkins job, you will write it as a text file, and you will be saving that inside your Git repository. So in our case, for this job or this project where we have created a Jenkins file, Jenkins job here, right? So pipeline job where you have this code. So you already have this code. So what you just need to do is you just copy this content, and you rather than using, now we are using the pipeline script, right? So what we will do is we will just create a file over here. So I'll just create a file and I'll call this as Jenkins file, and then I'll just put this content over here and I'll just commit to this GitHub. So now you can see you have a file called Jenkinsfile, and I will go back and I will create a new project or new job, and I'll call it as Jenkins file pipeline, and I'll use the pipeline script, pipeline job. And if I go to advanced, I'm going to use this option like pipeline script from the SCM, and I'm going to use the Git as an SCM, and you have to give the repository location here so that it can find the Jenkins file from the repository automatically. So now you can see it has already taken the repository, and this here is the master branch. So I'm going to select it has to be a master branch, and it's the file called Jenkins file. Now if I just save this and if I build it, let's see, it says unable to find the Jenkins file. I believe it's because of the naming conventions, or you need to have the naming has to be exactly the same. So it has to be capital, you can see it has to be like this, Jenkins file capital J, so you cannot have it in a different format, so you have to be exactly the same. So let me run it again. Now you can see it is found the file and it's trying to do the actions. So you have to be careful, like you cannot give a name with even no capital or small letter, it get changed, it will not be able to detect the Jenkins file. So it has to be exactly in this format, capital J and the Jenkins file. All others are, and there is no space, it's not Jenkins files, it's only Jenkins file. So now you can see it has automatically taken the pipeline script from the Jenkins file and it's trying to build our project. So the benefit of using this Jenkins file is like now you can easily control this Jenkins pipeline as a source code repository, in the source code repository itself. So you can manage the versions, you can edit there, you can have different versions available, and you can also control the permissions, so no, someone don't have to edit, you don't have to keep this version inside your job, so which will get deleted or someone makes some issues inside the job. So here in the source code you can manage this Jenkins file as a source code itself, so you'll have a better control in using the Jenkins file. So this is the better way to do it when you are doing a pipeline. Use it as a Jenkins file, you put the code there, then use create a pipeline using this Jenkins file. So I hope you are very clear about the Jenkins file and the Jenkins pipeline. Now let's see how we can create a Jenkins pipeline now to build a Docker image from a Docker file. So you should also know the basics of Docker file, how to write your Docker file for creating a Docker image, so which will not be covered as part of this tutorial. I can tell you to refer my playlist on Docker, which will tell you how to create a Docker file, the concept, the commands and everything. So now we are going to use a GitHub repository where you already have a Docker file we created. I will show you how that is written, so probably you get some understanding for that as well. So if I go back to same my Hello World Spring Boot app, you can see I already have a file called Docker file, and you can see I'm using some commands in the Docker file. So I'm going to use a container for, or I'm going to use the image for OpenJDK, and I'm going to copy this content of our Hello World into that into the container which we are going to create, and it will be under this location from it will be copied from .target and it will be copied to this, and the entry point will be like you are going to run it as a jar java.jar, java-jar, and the hello world.var. So that's the Docker file. It's a simple Docker file. So if you are using some other application like Node.js or Angular or any other applications, you can refer to my tutorials on my channel. I have shown multiple examples like how you can deploy Node.js applications or Spring Boot applications into Docker containers using a CI/CD pipeline. Also write Docker files. So let's see how we can create. So I will go back to my Jenkins dashboard. I'll create a new job, and I'm going to call this as Docker deployment job, and I'm going to call this as a pipeline again. And this time I'm going to use not a pipeline script because I already have the script there, or maybe I can edit the script there itself. So let me go back to this job and I will edit this job. So I already have this place where it's getting my GitHub. Then I will use this for create Docker image. So we just need to create a Docker image. We are not going to deploy it. So for creating, so let me clear out these screens. These jobs I don't need, these stages, so I will remove these stages. Okay, I'm here, so I will delete these stages. And what we require is this creating Docker image. We are going to call the command called docker build, then -t, and this is going to be my GitHub my Docker Hub repository tips for you, and I'm going to call this as Spring Boot latest, and it should be the Docker file should be in the current repository or current location. So I hope this should take care. So this all the brackets should be fine. So we are not going to go deploy it, so I just want to show you how to create a Docker image. So let me go back to my job, and I'm going to use this Poll SCM, and I'm going to use the same repository, and I'm going to put the git, and I'm going to put the repository here, and it should be master, and let's save it. Now let me build this job. Let's see what it does. So you can see it's checking out the SCM, and let's see what it does. So it has failed in the Docker create. Let me see what is the reason. Yep, I think it's because there is a typo in the Docker. Now one of this prerequisites is like the machine on which, whether it's a slave machine or it's a Jenkins master, to run this command you should have a Docker install in it. So if you don't have Docker installed, it should not be able to run the whole process. So let me edit again. So it should be Docker, not yep. It should be Docker build, and let me commit the change, and let me go back and let me build it again. Let's see what it does now. Yeah, this time it's giving a message because it's unable to connect to the Docker socket, so we don't have enough permission to create that. So basically the error message which we got as part of the permission is because the Jenkins user does not have the permission to run on Docker. So what you need to do is, like, you need to run a simple command to add the Jenkins user to the Docker group. So you can see like a user mode, and you are going to run this command and just restart your Jenkins. So you should be able to create the container in the Jenkins. Now if you see, I already run another job, and you can see it has already started creating the build, and it has showed a message like it is unable to find this var file. Why? Because we are trying to run this one directly, so we are not able to find this war file, because we have to use one more stage here, because you cannot have this directly running because you don't have the war file yet created. So I need to create a Maven package so that it can create the war file. So I will run this one and I will call the Maven build. So then I will use sh Maven mvn package. So now this will create the war file, and later using that war file we should be able to create the Docker image. That's what I believe it should work. So let's see it. So let's try to run this job again. So if you see, like, we are not making any changes inside the job, we are making all the changes in the GitHub repo where we are having our source code, right? So now we can see it's trying to build the package first, then we will see how it does for the Docker image as well. Now you can see it started the Docker image as well. Now you can see it has completed the whole process. So this time it is able to find the application hello.var inside the targets. Previously it was not there because we have not done the package, and it has also created the image. Now if I go back to this machine and if I go to Docker images, now you can see there is an image called tips for you Spring Boot, right? Just 22 seconds ago. So this is created as part of this process. So it's simply it has created. Now you can also build a container using this image in the same pipeline. So you can do that as well, but I'm not going into that deep. But I would suggest you go to my Jenkins playlist, and if you see, we have the complete tutorial. Like now this image can be pushed to Docker Hub, so you can use that image to deploy to your Kubernetes cluster. So you have a lot of other tutorials like how to integrate with Jenkins to have quality gates, so that when there is a quality failure it can stop this build. So Artifactory, like how you want to push these images into Artifactory as a binary management. So all those things you can see into this Jenkins playlist as well. Now let's talk about the next thing, which is Jenkins multi-branch pipeline. So what do you mean by Jenkins multi-branch pipelines? The multi-branch pipeline project enables you to implement different Jenkins file for different branches of the same project. So for example, now you have a GitHub repository where we have seen like Spring Boot or other application where you have a master branch, and we have a Jenkins file saved under that, which will be used to run our job. Now in cases where you have multiple developers working and you will have different feature branches, and you may have different you can use different Jenkins file in each branch, so that when you run the multi-branch pipeline, you will have all this pipeline will be run parallelly, or the Jenkins will take the Jenkins file from each of these branches and it will execute the pipeline. So what would happen is, when you create a multi-branch pipeline, Jenkins automatically discovers, manages and executes the pipeline for each branches which contains a Jenkins file in the source control. So it's pretty simple. Like you don't have to create a pipeline for each branches. You have to use a multi-branch, but you'll have to have a different Jenkins file in each branches so that Jenkins can automatically discover it. So let's see, like in our case for this Spring Boot, now I have only one branch, which is the master branch. Now if I want to create a feature branch, so I will just use feature branch and I will just create it. So now you can see I am inside the feature branch. So there is a master and a feature branch, and you have all the content here, and I can change this Jenkins file here so that I don't want to create the build, the Docker build. So I'll just remove this. I only want to do a package in this feature branch. So I will commit this, and if I go back to my Jenkins, I will create a new job and I will call it as multi-branch pipeline job, and this time you have to select this option called multi-branch pipeline. Now you see this option because when we install Jenkins, it has installed a lot of default plugins. Now if you don't see this, then you have to install the plugin for the multi-branch pipeline. So let's select this, and if I go back to my source code and I will add git, so I will add my git repository here, and what it will say, like, discover the branches. So I will put, I don't want to put anything like if you can have some filters like discover by reference tags, and you can have like checkouts, different things. So I don't want to put anything at this point. I will just put like all branches get the properties, and we are going to use the Jenkins file. You also have different options like periodically if it's not run, so there are other options to add. So there are different things. So let me just save this and let me try to run scan. You can see it is already running the pipeline. So if I go back now, you can see it's running two jobs. One is for the master and one is for the feature. So master, if you see, you can see it's git clone, git build, right? So let me go back, and the feature, you can see it's similar kind of jobs. So let me see what jobs are there. So in the feature branch, I have kept the Jenkins file as Maven package, and the master, it should be like this. So I hope. So you can see both the projects are running now. So you can see inside the master it has 4 stages, like git clone, git maven build, and docker create docker images. Now if I go back and if I check the feature branch, it have only 3 stages, git clone and maven build, right? So we have 2 separate Jenkins file in 2 separate branches. So it has automatically identified those Jenkins file, and it has created this multi-branch pipeline. So it's pretty simple. You just need to create different feature branches. You need to keep the Jenkins file over there with what configuration. So Jenkins will automatically detect, and it will run the whole process. Now, as I said again, if you want to learn more about Jenkins, which I have not covered, about integrating with other sources like SonarQube, Artifactory, or Kubernetes, those kind of things, I would ask you to refer this playlist, which I will link into this video description. You can also refer my other playlist on Kubernetes, Docker, all those things, so you'll be able to understand more DevOps technologies. So that is all for this full course. I hope it's helpful for you and it's interesting for you as well. So you should be able to get a good knowledge on Jenkins. If you're new to my channel, or if you want to watch more more videos like this, click on the subscribe button, and also like my videos, share, and also I would request you to give your comments on the feedback, and also give your feedback on the comment section, like what do you like, what has to be improved, and what kind of new videos you want to see. All those feedbacks, criticisms are welcome. So, and I appreciate your support you are given so far for me. So thank you for watching.